They laughed while I sat alone. "This table is for family," my sister whispered, her smile sharp enough to cut. I forced a laugh, pretending it didn't sting, but my chest tightened as the waiter approached. He set down a leather folder, and inside lay a bill, $3,247. Wagyu beef, truffles, vintage wine, none of it mine. Yet every eye at the table slid toward me as if payment was already carved into my fate. That night, I realized if I kept swallowing their cruelty, I'd vanish. Something inside me promised I would not disappear. The restaurant glowed with curated warmth, all reclaimed wood and Edison bulbs strung like constellations overhead. My family sat arranged in perfect symmetry at a long farm-style table, their laughter tuned to the rhythm of cutlery clinking and champagne fizzing. Phones hovered in every hand, capturing angles, adjusting filters, archiving another perfect night to our shared image. Each time a flash went off, I leaned slightly in, only to find myself cropped from the preview screen. Lana tilted the phone deliberately, centering her own smile, her fiancé's arm draped across her chair. I became the blur at the margin. My place card wasn't written in the same golden script as the others. Instead, my name had been scrawled across in dark ink, the kind of last-minute correction that looked like an afterthought. And then the worst part, my card wasn't at the table at all. It had been tucked against a side stool, set slightly back, as though I were a guest who had shown up uninvited. I hesitated, wondering if I should slide into that corner seat and swallow the insult, but Lana's voice cut sharp as glass. "This table is for family." She didn't shout. She didn't have to. Her words dripped, a whisper meant for me, but loud enough for everyone else to hear. My parents smiled thinly, the kind of tight-lipped smile that begged me not to make a scene. Around me, the air pressed heavy with their silence. I sank onto the stool, my knees tucked awkwardly against its edge, pretending it didn't matter. The laughter grew again, though it no longer sounded like joy. It sounded like the hum of an engine I had no control over, one that dragged me further and further away from who I used to be. I tried to focus on the centerpiece, candles glowing against small glass jars of lavender honey. My father had once told me that every pie should be split fair and square, that each slice mattered. I held that memory like a talisman, but even it felt brittle here. The waiter appeared with a leather folder, setting it quietly in front of me. "Your bill, ma'am." His voice was apologetic, his eyes darting toward the head of the table where Lana was raising her glass for a toast. My hands trembled as I opened it. $3,247. Wagyu beef. Truffles shaved over lobster. Vintage Bordeaux. Desserts layered in gold leaf. None of which I had ordered, none of which I had even touched. My glass still held water, condensation dripping down its side like proof of my restraint. I looked up, searching the table, and every gaze slid toward me, expectation already sharpened into certainty. I was meant to pay. "Naomi," my mother said softly, "don't make this into something it isn't. Just take care of it, for the family." Her voice was honey, her eyes steel. My stomach tightened, heat climbing into my throat. I bit my lip until it hurt, swallowing every word I wanted to fling back at them. Instead, I reached for my phone under the table, needing distraction. Group chat pings lit up the screen. Keller Circle. Photos from the night, tagged with laughter emojis and inside jokes. Except it wasn't my Keller Circle. This was a parallel thread, one I had never been added to. My reflection caught in Lana's Apple Watch as she scrolled, and I recognized the group's name flashing across her wrist. "You're being sensitive," my father said when he noticed me stiffen. "Don't embarrass us," my mother added. "Always so dramatic," Lana sighed, sipping her wine, the words sliding out like venom. I clenched my jaw. "Count it," I thought to myself. "Count how many times they call me dramatic, like a record-keeping of every way they try to rewrite my reality." I raised my phone, pretending to scroll, and instead quietly snapped a photo of my hand-crossed place card, the small evidence of how I'd been moved, erased, diminished. The waiter returned, leaning close, so only I could hear. "The card on file ends in 4418, he whispered. My heart dropped. That was my number. Somehow, they had put the entire night on my account. I excused myself, pushing back the stool. Just need some air, I muttered, before anyone could stop me. Outside, the night was sharp and cold, neon signs reflecting against the pavement. I lifted my phone and recorded a voice memo. My voice cracked as I whispered into it. They're going to crush me if I let them. I can't keep letting them. I stared at the blinking red light of recording, then hit delete. I went back inside, forcing my breath to steady, only to find the restaurant manager waiting near the entrance. He carried a folder in his hand, his expression caught between duty and discomfort. "Miss Keller," he said, flipping it open to reveal a prefix contract. "We have this authorization signed under your name." My blood ran cold. The signature scrawled at the bottom read, Naomi K. The handwriting was jagged, unfamiliar, and yet it tied me irrevocably to a night that wasn't mine. The morning after the dinner, I woke to the shrill ping of an email alert. My eyes blurred as I scrolled. Credit alert. A joint catering deposit has been opened in your name. The words hardened in my chest like ice. The account listed my social security number, signed months ago. A deposit had already been made, 5 figures. I pressed my palm against my forehead, a pulse pounding as if my body already knew this would not be an isolated mistake. When I confronted my parents, they didn't even flinch. My father waved his hand, dismissive. "Lana handles logistics, Naomi. You know she always has. She's protecting the family from headaches. You should be grateful she steps up." "Protecting?" I repeated, my voice thin. "She used my social security number." My mother sighed as though I were a child misunderstanding grown-up business. "You worry too much. It's all under control." The betrayal sliced deeper than their words. I felt myself shrink in the living room where family portraits hung, Lana's smile framed on every wall. I left before I said something I couldn't take back, clutching my phone like a lifeline. I pulled up my credit report at a cafe downtown, heart in my throat as the page loaded. There it was. Charity Gala, Keller Foundation, with me listed as treasurer. $20,000 routed through accounts I had never touched. My name. My liability. The foundation was theirs, not mine, but suddenly I was bound to it like a scapegoat tied to the altar. I closed my laptop, my hands shaking so badly the cup rattled against its saucer. Outside, I sat on a bench and tried to breathe. A child wandered over, clutching a carton of fries, one greasy strand dangling between his fingers. Without hesitation, he offered me a piece, eyes wide and trusting. I smiled despite the weight pressing on me and took it. "Thanks, kid," I whispered. For a moment, the salt and warmth grounded me, reminding me I wasn't just an entry on a fraudulent ledger. But reality snapped back when I checked my bank app. Dozens of pending transactions, restaurants, spas, boutique shopping, each tied to Naomi's card on file. The $3,147 dinner was only the spark at the surface. Beneath it smoldered a pattern, wide and calculated. That night, my phone buzzed with a private message. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in months sent a screenshot of the real group chat. Not the Keller circle I'd been shown once or twice, but the hidden one. Lana's messages were front and center. "She'll pay. She always does." A chorus of laughing emojis followed. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. I wanted to smash the phone against the wall, but instead, I opened a new folder. Evidence. I typed it out carefully. Dates, amounts, screenshots. I called the bank, disputed charges, requested a credit freeze. Each click was a stitch, binding together a fragile sense of control. Still, grief pooled under the anger. I reached for the wooden recipe box on my shelf, riffling until I found the index card written in my father's sharp, neat handwriting. 2 slices, 1 for each. His pie recipe, simple, fair, honest. The memory of him guiding my small hands as I cut even portions steadied me. My family now dealt in forged signatures and hidden debts, but somewhere behind me was a man who once believed fairness was sacred. Days later, I returned to my parents' house under the guise of dropping off mail. My mother bustled in the kitchen. Lana wasn't home. I wandered to the living room where the old upright piano sat dusted but silent. I lifted the bench lid, looking for the metronome I remembered from childhood. Instead, tucked beneath a stack of yellowed sheet music, I found a sealed envelope, my name stretched across the front in my father's handwriting. My breath caught. My fingers hovered over the flap, unwilling to tear yet desperate to know. The envelope was heavy in my hands, its paper browned at the edges, sealed with tape that had yellowed over time. My father's handwriting curved across the front, strong and deliberate. For Naomi. I sat on the piano bench, my pulse quickening as I broke the seal. Inside lay a letter folded around another document, its ink faint but legible. Naomi, the letter began. Your sister has always had a louder voice, and perhaps your mother and I leaned into that noise too often. This is my attempt to balance the scales. The cottage by the lake is yours. It belongs to the one who notices quiet things. I pressed the page against my chest, trembling. I could almost hear his voice, gravelly but kind, as if he stood at the dock with me again, telling me fairness mattered more than appearances. Tucked behind the letter was a copy of his will, older, dated 5 years ago, listing the cottage under my name. But records told another story. I checked online court filings, my breath shallow as the codicil loaded on the screen. Dated last year, it revoked my claim. The property had been reassigned fully to Lana. The witness signatures included a name that made my stomach twist, her fiancé's business partner. When I confronted my parents, my father's replacement smile, that carefully constructed mask he wore in Lana's presence, barely flickered. We just simplified things, he said. Balanced them, my mother added. You wouldn't know what to do with that cottage anyway. The betrayal struck deeper than words. My father's promise had been tangible, written, deliberate, and they had undone it with a single stroke, aligning themselves with Lana's ambition. I could feel the ground shifting beneath me, as though nothing in my family's world had ever been meant for me except as a buffer, a scapegoat. That night, I drove out to the lake, parking by the dock where the cottage stood, shutters drawn. I sat at the edge of the wood, the boards creaking beneath me, watching the sun bleed into the horizon. The cottage light flickered on by timer just as it had for years, as though my father were still inside, keeping watch. The memory clutched at me. His laughter, his pie slices, his fairness. I wrapped my arms around myself and cried quietly, the sound swallowed by cicadas. The next day, a neighbor slipped a USB drive into my palm. You'll want to see this, he said gently. That evening, I plugged it into my laptop. Doorbell cam footage filled the screen. Lana, dressed in her tailored coat, handing papers to a courier at my parents' door. The date stamp matched the codicil filing. My body went rigid, proof. She had orchestrated the entire theft. Sleep didn't come that night. When it did, it arrived in jagged fragments, sleep paralysis pinning me to the bed, shadows pressing against my chest. I woke gasping, hearing echoes of my mother's words. You're dramatic. You always exaggerate. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was difficult, impossible to love. The voices tangled inside me, looping like vines until I couldn't tell if I was angry or ashamed. Finally, I booked a therapist appointment, desperate for language to cage the chaos. I sat in the office, hands clenched, words tumbling out like broken glass. The therapist listened, then named what I had never dared. You are being scapegoated. Your family triangulates, allying against you to preserve their illusion. And they feed you intermittent reinforcement, a scrap of affection, then cruelty, so you cling harder. The recognition broke me open. I cried until my throat burned, until the tissues formed a small mountain on the floor between us, but in naming it, she handed me a map out of the fog. That night, I sat by my desk, my voice calm as I pressed record. Lana, I said steadily, I know what you did. I know about the cottage. I know about the codicil. One day, you'll face what you've stolen. Sir, my thumb hovered over send, but I stopped. Not yet. Instead, I wandered to the windowsill where a neglected plant sagged, its leaves browned and brittle. I poured water carefully into the soil, whispering words I didn't fully understand. By morning, a single green leaf had begun to uncurl, a fragile testament that life could return, even after drought. The email arrived 2 days later. Subject line, regarding the codicil. My pulse pounded as I opened it. It was from the notary who had stamped the amendment. His words scrolled across the screen. The signing felt off. Something about it troubled me. I kept a backup ledger in my files. If you need it, I'll provide a statement. I stared at the screen. My breath caught halfway between terror and relief. The walls my sister had built were starting to crack. The email from the notary was the spark that lit something in me. For weeks, I had felt crushed under the weight of their version of reality, their carefully built narrative that cast me as the problem. But now, the pattern revealed itself like a map laid flat. Injustice, being humiliated at the dinner. Betrayal, the codicil. Isolation, their hidden group chat, their circle without me. And the debt of belonging, always made to pay for the privilege of being included, never fully allowed to belong. I saw it clearly now, not as my failure, but as their system. I spent the next morning filing formal disputes for every fraudulent charge I could trace. My computer glowed with tabs, bank portals, credit bureaus, notarization requests. I preserved every metadata trail, every timestamp, every login location. I hired a trust and estates attorney, a woman with calm eyes who had seen too many families gutted by greed. "You're not alone in this," she told me. I almost believed her. That night, I pulled out the recipe card from my father's box and lined the counter with flour, sugar, butter. My hands moved from memory, the rhythm of mixing and rolling grounding me in something good. When the pie cooled, I cut the first slice and set it on a plate just for me. Not for family, not to share, not to beg for approval. For me. I ate it slowly, the crust flaking beneath my fork, and with each bite, I felt something in me knit together. Then, my phone buzzed. A cousin I barely heard from sent a message. "You need to hear this." Attached was a voice memo. I pressed play. Lana's voice came through, smooth and confident. "If Naomi won't pay, we'll just prove she agreed. Easy." Her laughter followed, mingled with someone else's. My stomach turned, bile rising. Proof again, not only of her schemes, but of her arrogance. I took the recording straight to my attorney the next morning. She leaned forward, fingers steepled. "This isn't just family tension anymore. This is fraud, coercion, maybe even conspiracy. We'll file a petition to invalidate the codicil. Conflict of interest, undue influence, forged consent, the works. I'll subpoena the doorbell footage, compel the notary ledger. The law is slow, Naomi, but it is steady. If you want to fight, we fight." "Yes," I said, my voice steady for the first time in weeks. "We fight." But I knew this couldn't be won on paper alone. So I crafted a second plan, a soft one, rooted not in lawyers but in truth. I wrote an anonymous post online, laying out the playbook of a toxic family. I didn't use names, didn't point fingers, but I described the scapegoating, the financial exploitation, the hidden betrayals. Within hours, comments poured in, strangers telling their own stories, messages filling my inbox. I thought I was the only one. Stay strong. You're not crazy. For the first time, I wasn't shouting into silence. I had an echo. Financially, I built a wall, brick by brick. New accounts separate from everything they had ever touched. A credit lock, document safes. An emergency fund tucked away where no one could find it. My therapist guided me through a contact-low protocol, helping me step back without setting fire to every bridge. "Distance doesn't mean you don't care," she reminded me. "It means you're protecting yourself." One Saturday morning, I walked through the farmer's market. The sun was gentle, fruit stalls stacked high with peaches, bread warm in baskets. I moved slowly, savoring the ordinary rhythm of people choosing food, laughing with vendors. For the first time in months, life felt like it could be normal again. I bought honey from a beekeeper, thinking of my father's pies, and for a moment, I almost believed in sweetness. That afternoon, my attorney called. "We pulled new expense reports from the foundation," she said. "Naomi, one of the line items is labeled table experience. Guess the exact amount?" I didn't answer. $3,247. she continued. "The dinner. It wasn't just a humiliation. It was logged as a foundation expense, with you as treasurer." The phone slipped in my hand. Even after everything I had uncovered, I still hadn't expected them to be this brazen. The night that broke me was written into their books as if it were an official event, with me as the responsible party. I hung up, the market honey still on my counter, untouched. The invitation arrived like an ambush wrapped in gold foil. "Family celebration," the card announced in Lana's precise calligraphy, as though nothing was fractured, nothing had been stolen. She chose the same restaurant where humiliation had first ignited this war. I stared at the card for a long time, then forwarded it to my attorney. "We go," she said simply, "but on our terms." The night shimmered with polished glasses and curated menus, Lana orchestrating every detail like a conductor reclaiming her stage. I entered not alone this time, but beside my attorney, her briefcase heavy with evidence. Conversations dipped, eyes shifted, but Lana lifted her chin in practiced superiority. "Naomi," she purred. "Glad you could make it." I sat, hands steady, and waited for the right moment. When the waiter cleared the first course, my attorney rose. "We have some documents to share," she said, her voice clear. The screen she set on the table flickered to life, footage rolling. Lana at the door, handing papers, the date stamped to match the codicil. Murmurs rippled down the table. Next came the notary's ledger, handwriting confirming suspicion, his signed statement scrolling across the screen. Then the foundation ledger with its glaring entry, "Table experience, $3,247. Gasps from cousins, uncles shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Credit logs followed, transaction after transaction routed through my accounts. Finally, screenshots of the secret group chat, Lana's mocking words, "She'll pay. She always does." The room fell into a vacuum, forks stilled, glasses untasted. My attorney closed the laptop with finality, her gaze unblinking. I inhaled deeply, then spoke, my voice carrying more strength than I felt. "From this moment forward, I am not your treasurer. I am not your scapegoat. There will be no more financial entanglement. The cottage will be returned to me, as my father intended, and I will have a written acknowledgement of everything you've done." Silence held. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then my father cleared his throat, but no words came. My mother pressed her lips thin, the cracks in her composure spidering across her face. I excused myself to the restroom, closing the door softly behind me. My reflection stared back from the mirror. I pressed my hands against the sink, breathing deeply until the shaking subsided. The camera in my mind lingered on my steady breath, the simple miracle of calm in the storm. When I returned, I caught the movement at the far end of the table, my mother's hand creeping toward her phone, thumb hovering over the glowing screen. My attorney's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Please don't. That's spoliation." The word hung heavy, foreign to most, but undeniable in its warning. My mother froze, guilt raw in her eyes. Then Lana erupted. "This is Naomi's vendetta. She's always been jealous, always tearing this family apart. She's manipulating all of you." Her voice rose in waves, each accusation more desperate than the last. But the facade was crumbling. Faces that once turned from me now looked at her, questioning. Parents who once stood solid at her side now shifted uneasily. The spell was breaking. Across the table, her fiancé paled. He understood liability when he saw it, the risk coiled around his future like barbed wire. Without a word, he removed his hand from Lana's, folded his napkin neatly, and left. She stared after him, stunned. I reached into my bag and set a pie on the table. Golden crust, simple, unadorned. I sliced it evenly, each piece measured, balanced. Beside it, I placed an envelope. Inside, a letter. "This is what fair looks like." I left it there, my final word written in pastry and ink. I stood, no flourish, no triumphant smile. Just the weight of relief pressing against my ribs. Outside, the dusk light spilled over the street, painting everything in quiet amber. I walked home alone, each step soft, deliberate. No victory parade, no vengeance roar, only release. As I unlocked my door, my phone buzzed. An email from the court clerk. Hearing date confirmed. Preliminary injunction granted on asset transfers. The screen glowed in the dim hallway, a small beacon of justice. The courtroom was colder than I expected, its walls tall and indifferent, but the judgment landed like sunlight. The codicil was voided. The judge's gavel struck once, final, and the words etched themselves into my bones. The lakeside cottage would be restored to me. Restitution was ordered for the fraudulent charges, each dollar returned like a thread pulling free from the knot they had tied around me. For the first time in years, the law, not my family's twisted version of it, stood on my side. When the decision spread, the ripple was undeniable. Cousins who had stayed silent began to send messages, tentative but sincere. "I'm sorry," one wrote, "for laughing when I should have spoken up." Another admitted, "We all knew Lana went too far. We just didn't want to be next." Their words couldn't erase the wounds, but they mattered. Silence had been complicity. Acknowledgement was the first step toward truth. I didn't burn bridges. I didn't need to. Instead, I built boundaries as firm as stone. Low contact, clear terms, no more financial ties, no more guilted obligations, no more rewriting of my reality. My life wasn't theirs to script. The arc was complete. Revenge had never been the goal. Justice came, and in its wake, peace unfurled, delicate but steady. At the cottage, I hosted my first gathering since the ruling. Not a party, not a spectacle, just a small tea by the water. 2 friends sat with me on the dock, steam curling from cups, laughter easy and unforced. They weren't blood, but they were chosen family, people who stayed not out of obligation, but out of love. The lake shimmered under the afternoon sun, and I felt the weight lift from my shoulders, replaced by something softer. Then the mail arrived. A letter in my mother's hand, trembling across the envelope. I almost left it sealed, fearing poison disguised as apology, but I opened it slowly. "Naomi," it read, "I don't know how to be a good mother to you. Will you teach me?" My throat tightened. It wasn't redemption, not yet, but it was a crack in the wall she had built between us, a question instead of a command. I folded it carefully, placing it in a drawer, unresolved but not discarded. I poured my energy into the cottage. Boards sanded, windows washed, curtains hung to welcome light again. In the kitchen, I framed my father's pie card above the oven, the handwriting etched into my daily life. It was no longer a relic of what I'd lost, but a reminder of what I could build. This place was mine, not as armor, not as a fortress, but as a home that reflected who I had become. The story couldn't stay just mine. So I began to share. Quietly at first, forums, support groups, letters to strangers. I wrote about legal steps, financial safeguards, therapy tools. People wrote back, thanking me for showing them a way out of their own cages. My pain bent into purpose, transformed into a rope others could hold when they felt like drowning. One evening, I set a table I had built with my own hands. The wood carried every mark of my labor, every scrape and stain a testimony to survival. Plates rested evenly spaced, silverware aligned. At the head, I placed one extra chair, empty but intentional. A place reserved for anyone who needed a seat. For the forgotten, the scapegoated, the silenced. A place I once begged for but now could offer freely. The cottage grew quiet as dusk rolled in. I sat back, listening to the hum of crickets, the creak of old boards settling into the night. My gaze lingered on the empty chair, its shadow stretching across the floor. The camera in my mind stayed fixed, as if the universe itself leaned in to witness the stillness. Then came a knock at the door. Soft, uncertain, but real. I rose slowly, my hand brushing the frame of my father's pie card as I passed, the words steady above me. 2 slices, 1 for each. The door waited, the night breathed, and I opened it to whatever would come. It wasn't triumph I carried with me, nor vengeance. It was freedom.